And it's very possible to end up with the right player at the right time, but the wrong card. Back in the 90s, I picked up a Derek Jeter Upper Deck Top Prospects #1 card for $5. And since that time, 30 years ago, the card has climbed in value a ton. It's now worth $6. So you could say I'm doing pretty well over here. But all jokes aside, Jeter's 1993 SP foil has climbed by about 1,200% over that exact same time period. Now, when you compare that to the whopping 20% ROI on my card, it should become pretty clear pretty quickly that you can absolutely pick the right player, but the wrong card, and that can make all the difference in the world. Today, I'm gonna walk you through my exact process for how I decide which cards are worth buying and which ones to avoid. Let's dive right in. Now, there are 6 things I look at every single time I buy a card, so we'll walk through each of those real quickly, and then we're going to apply it to some real-world examples so you can see what this looks like in practice when you're trying to decide whether or not to buy a card. So the first one is the most important one, and this is strategy. So what is the actual strategy I have in mind when I'm buying this card? And you can break this down into the why I think this card's value will rise and when I think it's going to happen. If I don't have both, I don't have a strategy. Guys, I don't know about you, but I'm here to make money. I'm not in the wishing business, so I don't want to leave things up to chance. And if I don't have a clear why and a clear when, then I'm effectively hoping for the best, and that's not a very good strategy. In fact, that's actually not a strategy at all. So I encourage you to be able to clearly articulate what's the actual play here. Am I grading the card? Am I buying it at such a steep discount that I can flip it right away? Am I planning on speculating on player performance? Am I buying a lot that I think I can piece out for profit? There are lots of ways to win, but I just want to make sure that I have a clear strategy in mind when I'm making the purchase. And then I also want to be thinking about what needs to actually happen for this to work. For example, if I'm grading the card, I probably need to send a card that's clean enough to actually have a realistic chance at getting a 10. And then of course, I also need to be okay with the timeline. So grading is an easy one because we already know there's a predetermined timeline when you send a card to PSA. So if I was sending a card for grading, my why would be I'm grading the card and I think the grade is going to add value to it. And then my when would be the turnaround time. So whatever the month, 3, 4, 5 months, depending on your turnaround time that it's going to take for PSA to get the card back to you. Now, strategy is the single most important thing because if I don't have a strategy, that's a deal breaker for me. So this is the one that I always start with. All right, the second one is liquidity. So I'm looking at how easy is it going to be to actually sell this card when I'm ready to move on from it. Now, there are lots of factors that contribute to a card's liquidity. So first one is always player popularity. Is this player actually in demand or is it some random sleeper pick that nobody cares about? Some players are just easier to deal in than others. What I've found over the years is that it's a lot easier to deal in the names that the market's already interested in rather than trying to find that diamond in the rough that nobody really cares about where you have to try to convince the market that they should care about buying your card. The other big piece of liquidity, of course, is the card type. So are we looking at a card that's from a popular set? Generally speaking, Topps Chrome is going to be a better set than Topps Cosmic. Just like Panini Prism is going to be a better set than Gridiron Football. So once again, you have to put yourself in the buyer's shoes on the front end here and think about when I go to sell this card, am I going to have lots of demand for it? You can make your life a lot easier by buying the cards that are already in demand. And then if we go down one layer even further, we can look at what specific card are we targeting. So some parallels are going to be more or less popular than others. A Topps Chrome True Gold Refractor numbered out of 50 is going to outsell a Topps Chrome Gold Wave Refractor or a Gold Speckle Refractor. Even if they're still numbered out of 50, that True Gold, the solid gold color parallel, is typically going to be the one that people want the most. And if you're not sure about this, you can always look back to historical data. This is the #1 place I go when I'm not sure about a card type. I want to see some history and some precedent that that specific card type has actually done a good job of not only holding in value over time, but hopefully rising in value over time when you look at the key players from past years. All right, the third bucket is rarity. So this one's self-explanatory, but if you're targeting cards that really aren't that rare, you're going to have a lot of competition when you go to sell. And that doesn't mean that you can't make money on those cards. It typically just means that you're going to be stuck taking whatever the market is paying for that card rather than having any influence over the value when you go to sell. Now, if you get into some of the rarer cards out there where when you go to sell, you have one of the only copies available, that's when you have some control over the price. And that's a fun position to be in, especially if it's a liquid good player that lots of people are after. Now, rarity can come in the form of the card itself being serial numbered or a short print or a case hit. Rarity can also come in the form of grading. So the pop report matters here, and you got to keep in mind the pop report can change over time, but a good example of this is looking at the 2024 Prism products. They all had atrocious gem rates across the board. So the gem rate's like the number of PSA 10s divided by the total number of cards graded. It's kind of like the success rate. And the gem rates for Prism Football, Prism NBA, Prism WNBA are all under 30%. Really lousy. So sometimes that can work in your favor if you're targeting the copies that are graded as PSA 10s, or if you're fortunate enough to find a clean raw copy of that card that you can get graded yourself and get a PSA 10. So those 10 grades are going to be a lot lower on those sets compared to other years that had much higher gem rates. All right, the next one is condition. So I asked the question, will the condition help me or is it going to hurt me when I go to make the sale? So the obvious first question is the card graded or is it raw? If it's graded, is it a desirable grade like a PSA 10 or at least a PSA 9? Or are we talking about a PSA 7 that has some legitimate issues with it? Generally speaking, a PSA 10 is the only grade that's going to dramatically help the value for ultra modern cards. PSA 9s are acceptable. Anything lower is typically going to make it a little bit trickier to sell the card. And if the card is raw, is it a grading candidate? If so, great. But if not, does it have flaws that are going to make it difficult to sell the card on the back end? Because anytime you have to list a card and note a bunch of damage, a bunch of flaws to it, and that's just going to make it trickier because there aren't that many people out there that are actively looking for damaged goods. All right, the fifth one is value. So am I buying at a price that makes sense? So first of all, it's just the obvious question of, does this actually fit into your budget? While I certainly encourage you to get active in the card market, I do not encourage you to spend next week's grocery money on sports cards. The next question, of course, is it priced fairly? So just because we find a card that we like doesn't necessarily mean that we can find it at a fair price. So a lot of times the process here is simply taking a look at recent sales in your favorite comp tool to determine, is this a card that I can buy at or near market value? And then I also like to be thinking about what's the realistic downside here versus the upside. There's always risk when we buy sports cards, but sometimes you can find plays where there's a lot more upside than there is downside. And those are the types of plays that I like to make. All right, and the last one on my list is opportunity cost. So if I put my money into this card, I cannot also put that same money into this card, or this card, right? So you have to consider what are the alternatives out there. The question that I like to ask myself is this the card that's going to rise highest and fastest? And if so, great, I'm ready to go. If not, then maybe I shouldn't buy that card. Maybe I should go figure out the one that is going to rise highest and fastest and buy that one instead. And here's the thing, we don't always know because we can't predict the future, but based on the information that we have today, we just want to be able to say that yes, this is the play that feels like it's the best place to put our money right now. Now, where we put our money directly impacts our success or failure as card investors. So you got to keep in mind there are bad plays out there are mediocre plays out there are good plays, there are great plays out there. Save your money for the good plays at worst and the great plays ideally. It takes some discipline to not spend money that's sitting there in your card account, but you gotta be ready when that great play shows its face. All right, so that's the checklist, pretty straightforward. Now the decision process here is pretty important. So I go through the checklist and the first thing I'm asking is, do I have a strategy and a timeline that I'm okay with? Because if not, that's my first deal breaker. If so, then we can move on and consider the other 5. Now, if I do have a strategy and a timeline that I like and the card passes the full list, then that's an easy green light and I'm comfortable moving forward with that purchase. Now here's where it gets tricky because not every card is going to pass every single one of the 6 criteria here. So what happens if a card fails one or more of the checks? It doesn't necessarily mean that the card is automatically off the table, but I really want to be able to clearly explain why I still want to buy that card even though it didn't pass one of the checks, or else I'm probably better off just skipping that card and waiting for the next one. A good example of this might be that I'm targeting an orange Ray Wave parallel out of 25 instead of a true orange refractor out of 25. That's not my favorite parallel, but if I'm planning on grading and flipping that card, then I don't really consider that a stopper because I still have a clear strategy. I've run the numbers. I know that there's upside there if I get the grade I'm looking for. And even though it might be a little bit harder to move that card on the back end, there's still going to be plenty of profit margin available if I get the grade I need. So that's a play I can live with even if it doesn't perfectly check all 6 boxes. And by the way, if you want a copy of this checklist, I actually built this into a PDF that you can grab completely for free. I'm going to put a link in the description and all you got to do is drop your email and I'll send this over to you for free right now. All right, should we walk through some examples here? Because this is where it gets fun. So the first one we'll do is an easy one. We'll use the Shohei Ohtani 2018 Top Series 2 rookie card. And let's go through the checklist. The strategy on this one is I think that this card is clean enough to get graded. It's also $125 raw and it's $600 if it gets a PSA 10. So there's a very clear strategy in place here. I'm going to grade the card. The timeline is the next piece. So because we already know PSA's grading turnaround times, I already have a fixed timeline in place because I know I'm going to have this card back within the next 4 or 5 months or so. And that's if I don't decide to go with a faster turnaround. What about liquidity? So Shohei Ohtani is one of the most popular players. Topps flagship is a key set with many decades of history in the market, so no issues there. Now, what about rarity? So rarity's tough on this one because it's actually just a base card, but we're adding some rarity by getting it graded and making it a PSA 10, hopefully. And the thing with rarity, it's not as big of a deal to me when I'm the one grading the card myself, because that means that I'm the one that's building in a bunch of profit margin, assuming I get the grade I need, of course. But with that profit margin built into the card, I actually don't need to dictate the price. So I'm completely okay with grading base cards. I'm just not a big fan of buying base cards that are already graded. What about condition? So we know that we're going to be grading this card, so the condition is clean enough based on my inspection of the card to at least have a chance at the grade that I need. And that's all I'm really looking for here. Now, as far as value goes, I did buy this card for market price, and I feel good about the upside compared to the downside, where I'm risking the grading fee and the time, but the upside is multiple hundreds of dollars of potential profit. The downside is really just the grading fees, and just given who Shohei Ohtani is, I might even have a chance to make money even if this card gets a 9 instead of a 10. All right, last one, opportunity cost. So could I theoretically put this $125 into a different card that's going to rise higher and faster? Sure, maybe there's something out there, but it's going to be hard to find a card that's going to rise by 4x in a matter of 3, 4, 5 months. So this is a play that I can stand behind and feel like I've checked every single box on the list here, and I'm comfortable moving forward with this play. And that's why I'm holding this card, because I already bought it. All right, what about this Connor Griffin 2024 Bowman Chrome Draft first year PSA 10? Now, I'm recording this during spring training, so Griffin cards have been on fire lately, and we're also at a time of year where baseball tends to hit a relative high point. So when we look at the data, Connor Griffin cards are actually at their all-time high right now. And since we're so close to the season, I actually don't know that they're going to go a whole lot higher before the season starts, and I might not even have the card in hand by the time the season starts. So I'm basically signing up for a play where I'm speculating on his performance this year. Now, that can work if you're right about the player and the player exceeds the market's expectations when the games actually begin, but it's a harder game to play because we're trying to predict the future. So for this particular card, I actually just don't have a strategy that I like in mind, and so for me, this card is a pass. Even though Griffin's a great player, the card would be highly liquid. I just don't think that this is the right buy-in price, nor do I like the strategy, because I'd ultimately be signing up for a situation where I'm kind of just hoping for the best with his performance. All right, let's do another one. What about this Trae Young 2018 Prism Pink Pulsar numbered out of 42 as a PSA 10? So first we have to look at strategy, right? And we could say that at the time of this recording, we're coming off of an injury-riddled season for Trae Young, and maybe that means that we can buy on the low, especially compared to where his cards were in the past. But just because his values used to be higher in the past does not mean that they will ever get back to those prices. And then the timeline for this is likely on the way back into next season. The narrative that you would need people to believe is that he's healthy again, he's going to bounce back and have a big season, and that's the type of thing that could boost values moving into the season. Now, that's a little bit weak. We've got to stretch a little bit to get to the point where we think that people are really going to be super high on him going into his age 28 season with a bad franchise. But okay, I'll buy it if we think we can get a low enough price on his cards right now. Now, liquidity is the part that I have an issue with here, because I really just don't see people getting as excited about Trae Young out of all the players. He's not a prospect anymore. He's on a worse franchise now than he was before the trade. And also, even though we're dealing in Prism and it's a PSA 10, pink pulsar parallels tend to not sell as well as you might think for a card that's numbered out of 42. And it might just be because this is a pink colored card in a male dominated market, but it's also a pulsar, and pulsars tend to not do as well as the true parallels. For example, if we wanted to go after a Trae Young card, we could go after an orange numbered out of 49, and that's more of a true parallel that we're going to likely have an easier time moving when we go to sell. So ultimately, the nail in the coffin here is when you get to number 6 on the list, opportunity cost. It's just really difficult to make the argument that this is the card that's going to rise highest and fastest out of all the possible cards we could spend $500 on right now. And for that reason, it's not for me. All right, we'll do 2 more of them here. So the next one, what about a Caleb Williams 2024 Prism black and white checker rookie card? So let's start with strategy and timeline. So first of all, I like the timing on this play because typically in the spring when I'm recording this video, football is at its relative low point for the year compared to where it's going to be moving into the following season. So oftentimes that means you can pick up a decent deal on a card like this. But anytime I'm buying a raw card, I'm typically buying it because I want to try to get it graded. So the key strategy here is that we're buying to grade with the extra bonus that we might be getting a decent deal on it relative to future prices. And then our timeline, once again, is the grading turnaround. So yeah, I think we can check the box for strategy. So what about liquidity? Well, Caleb Williams is one of the top up and coming rising star caliber quarterbacks in the NFL, so no issues there. This is also a parallel from Prism, so I really don't have any doubts that we would be able to move this on the back end. It's also super easy to identify exactly what the card is just by looking at it. So number 3, Rarity. Yes, this is a rarer parallel, so we're good there as well. Now, condition is important because we know that 2024 Prism was a hard one to grade. So you got to be really picky when you're looking at these cards and make sure that we're finding one that looks like it's well centered, that doesn't have clear and obvious corner issues. But let's say we find one on eBay that we're comfortable with. And then from a value standpoint, this card's going to be a couple $100 raw right now. So let's say we feel good about the pricing. And again, because we're buying at what tends to be a relative low point for the football market, I feel pretty good about the upside versus the downside as well. Especially because if we're grading this card and it gets a PSA 10, that pushes the value close to $1,000. Now, it's not going to be an easy 10 to get because we already know this is a tough set to grade, but there is big time upside if we get the grade we're looking for. And finally, opportunity cost. So could we theoretically find a card that's going to rise higher and faster? Of course we could, but I do like that this has 4 to 5x upside if it gets the grade we're looking for, and we're able to buy at a relative low point compared to where I believe these cards will be in the future. It's hard to predict the future, but looking at historical patterns in the football market, if the market follows a similar pattern this year, we're going to be just fine. And so this card pretty easily checks every single box, and so that's actually why I bought one of these myself recently. Now, here's the thing. This card came in the mail, and it's actually not gradable. I looked at it closely, and unfortunately, it has a corner issue that's going to stop me from submitting this to PSA. So my plan didn't work out this time, but guess what? I would still buy this card over again because I believe in the reasoning. I believe in the card itself. I believe in the strategy that I had in mind. And just because you can check off every box on the list here doesn't mean that it's always going to work out in your favor, but it is going to put you in better position to succeed more often when you follow this checklist versus when you don't. All right, last one we'll talk through today, and this is a fun one because I actually just got my mail, and this is fresh from eBay Authenticity Guarantee. So we're gonna open this baby live, and I'll show you what we've got. Okay, the live unboxing of straight from eBay Authenticity Guarantee. We've got ourselves another copy of the exact same Caleb Williams card that we just looked at. So I bought this one already graded a PSA 10, and I did that for a specific reason. One, we already checked the boxes on the player, the liquidity of the card set, the grade and the condition I'm okay with, the value, I like that we're buying this at the right time of year, the strategy, once again, I like that we're buying this at the right time of year, and we've got a lot of history that suggests that football cards tend to rise of players like this on the way into the season. And this is a little different than buying raw to grade because I already paid up to pay for the PSA 10 premium. Now, my preference is to grade whenever possible so that I can make that premium myself. But what I like about how hard 2024 Prism is that means that there aren't going to be that many other copies of this type of card that end up getting PSA 10s. Just like I bought this copy thinking it might be gradable and it comes in and has a bummed corner, a lot of the copies of this card are way off center, or they have surface issues or corner issues just like mine did. And we see that in the gem rate for this set because the gem rate on this specific card is only 8% right now. So while there's big time upside baked into it, if you do get a 10, it's going to be a very difficult grade. And that means that rarity is working in our favor big time because guess what kinds of cards people want first? They want PSA 10s, not 9s, not 8s, not raw. They're looking for 10s. And at the time of this recording, at least, this is only pop 21. So that puts me in the driver's seat when I go to sell, because there typically aren't going to be that many other copies of a card like that on the market all at once. And that's what gives me a lot more influence over the ultimate price that I sell this card for. So it's a little bit of a different strategy, but it absolutely still checks every single one of the boxes when you go through the checklist. So if we zoom all the way out on the card market and we look at what does it take to be successful, a big part of it is picking the right players at the right times, but your card selection can absolutely influence your results in a major way. And it's very possible to end up with the right player at the right time, but the wrong card, and you won't win as big as you could have had you picked the right card. So if you consistently go through this checklist before you make your purchases, you're going to avoid a lot of bad and even just mediocre buys, and you're going to end up saving your money for the good and the great plays that really put you in position for success. And you're certainly not going to get every single one right. I mean, I just showed you that. But if your process is solid, that's when the results will follow over time. Again, if you want a copy of my checklist that you can reference when you're making your buys, check the link in the description. All you got to do is drop your email and I'll send it over to you. And if you want help actually applying this and finding good opportunities, that's exactly the type of thing we do in my card investing community, Ignite. I'll leave a link in the description with full details for that too. But otherwise, we'll see you on the next video.